These are the seeds of social unrest in this country. You can only drive so big of a wedge between the haves and the have-nots. If you're in the middle, you're screwed, and you're pissed, and you're a taxpayer, and I'm all for it.
We are in debt, a lot of debt. The U.S. government spends much more than it takes in. During President Obama's tenure, the national debt nearly doubled. Democrats and Republicans agreed to government bailouts of numerous industries after the 2008 financial crisis. Some politicians say there is a limit to what the country can afford.
The greatest threat to our nation is we ourselves. It's our inability to deal with the fiscal issues that we as a nation have.
The director of national intelligence, Dan Coates, has said that Washington's lack of fiscal discipline undermines national security.
Some economists say that the U.S. can increase its debt indefinitely, but then we would be in uncharted territory.
Somebody has to tell you the truth. Normal is never coming back. But what's about to come is much worse than what we've already seen. In 1971, that cost to service the debt was 2%. It's now going to be 40 next year. That's assuming everything goes well. Interest costs then were 5%. Today, the government gets to borrow from the Fed at 1.5% cost. I want to talk about being a slave. You get nothing from the federal government. There is no opportunity to fix anything in our country. And we all work as hard as we are now just to service the debt. And Wall Street wonders why Warren Buffett just invested $700 million in gold.
Politicians trying to put a Band-Aid on the mess that COVID-19 and their own restrictions have made of this country. Sending everybody $2,000 will add another $500 billion to the national debt. Not that anyone in D.C. really cares.
And this free money doesn't come from heaven. It comes from the future earnings of those who will be struggling to get back on their feet. A massive wealth transfer from the future to the present. There is only one way to end the suffering caused by these lockdowns, and that is to end them.
All right, Republicans try and try, but sadly they are never heard.
In the 1958 movie The Blob, starring a young Steve McQueen, a giant expanding mass, a blob, threatens to destroy an entire town and everyone in it. It keeps growing and growing and no one can stop it. The United States debt is like that blob. Unlike the fictional blob, it threatens to destroy more than an entire town, it threatens the entire nation.
In part two, we look at the consequences for continued inaction and what, if anything, can be done to fix the rising debt.
I'm worried that the problem is getting worse, both because we've waited too long to make changes, that the numbers continue to get worse, and the partisanship in this town is leading both parties to compete over who can be more fiscally irresponsible, and that's a very dangerous game.
All of this has real-world consequences on your wallet and the U.S. economy as a whole. Who holds our debt? The top holders are actually U.S. citizens and American entities such as state and local governments, pension funds, mutual funds, and the Federal Reserve. Together, they own 69%, or $13 trillion of the national debt. Foreign nations hold 31% of the total debt. Japan is now the largest foreign holder of debt with $1.1 trillion, followed closely by China.
So what are we to do? First, we need to identify the primary source of the problem. It's pretty basic. You can talk about defense spending, welfare spending, or bloated budgets all you want, but it really comes down to two programs: Social Security and Medicare. Unless we get a handle on these monsters, the debt blob will continue to expand until it overwhelms us. According to data from the Congressional Budget Office, these two programs alone face a $100 trillion shortfall over the next 3 decades. How is that possible? Well, for starters, you've got 74 million baby boomers rolling into retirement age, 10,000 a day. On top of that, Medicare recipients typically receive benefits that are triple the size of what they paid into the system. Without some serious adjustments, these programs are going to fail. This is not the fault of retirees. It is simple demographics and math.
Those seem like scary numbers, so you might think lawmakers would be scrambling to deal with the next fiscal cliff, raising the debt ceiling. Past crises have led to partial government shutdowns, yet congressional leaders and administration officials are downplaying any immediate concern this time.
But we will deal with it.
So what is it? The debt limit, or debt ceiling, is the congressionally imposed amount the U.S. Treasury can borrow to pay the government's bills. Raising that borrowing power to avoid financial default allows continued spending on things like Social Security and Medicare benefits, tax refunds, military salaries, along with interest on the national debt and other obligations.
Ceiling is a misleading word of sorts. It implies a stopping point.
No, squeezing the rich, slashing defense, or eliminating welfare won't come close to paying the bill. Neither will any plausible level of economic growth. The $100 trillion hole is too big. So let's talk fairness. If mom and dad can't make the mortgage payment, they don't tell the kids to get full-time jobs to make up the shortfall. They move to a different house that matches their budget. Likewise, when America promises senior citizens benefits far exceeding what they paid into the system, we should not tell young working families that their taxes must be doubled or tripled. We should instead pare back those benefits to an affordable level. That's only fair and sensible, right? But when it comes to the debt, neither of these qualities seem to figure in.
Yeah, Douglas, the longer that these stimulus bills go on, the more rounds that we get of this, the more likely it is that they start to cover things that existed before the coronavirus pandemic ever arose. You're seeing that with the states now. They want to solve problems that really have nothing to do with coronavirus. You're seeing Congress talking about more and more regulations on business, which ends up killing the growth that was driving the economy. It seems to me we need to stop these stimulus bills as soon as possible, because the longer they go on, the more they undermine the real strength of the economy.
The problem is not going to be stimulus, sort of throwing money at people. The U.S. economy has weathered enormous headwinds over the, over 250 years that it's been around. It's become the largest, most powerful economy on the globe for a reason. You don't need to manage it from Washington. You need to get out of the way, and so the time for stimulus has passed. We've done that job. Yeah. Now it's time to turn to just having the economy grow.
So what can we do? More to the point, what can you do? First, be sure to save for your own retirement. Do not overly depend on a government that has promised more than it can possibly pay out to take care of you. Second, tell Washington to get a spine and deal with Social Security and Medicare.
The argument then becomes about the taxpayer who's pissed off and saying, let me get this straight. You can constantly bail yourself out and you can constantly go print money with this quantitative easing. Why the hell do I have to pay taxes? Why do I pay taxes?
Now, the city of Chicago has just bailed out its pension again. So you're told that your property taxes and your state income taxes are going to have to rise to pay for it. Let's just say Social Security and Medicare run out of money. So you're also told by the great people in Washington that your federal taxes are going to have to go up as well. So you're bailing out the pensioners, you're bailing out the federal government, you're bailing out corrupt state politicians and unions. These are the seeds of social unrest in this country. You can only drive so big of a wedge between the haves and the have-nots. If you're in the middle, you're screwed.